Welcome everyone to our first Montessori Europe webinar of 2021. It is our delight to welcome many participants from different parts of Europe and also different parts of the world. Tonight's topic takes us to the roots of Montessori education and to the beginnings of children's experiences. We will be looking at practical life activities and what they really mean to children and what opportunity they give to us as practitioners to plant seeds of cosmic education. This may be something that you have already done, in which case, please share your experiences, but it may also be something that is a little bit challenging because you think that cosmic education relates to children's experiences at elementary level. We have Hannah Bainham to share her ideas and her thoughts about this topic. There's a little presentation which will take about 20 minutes. We will then go into breakout rooms for 20 minutes. Because it is the first webinar, we would like to introduce you one of the new things we thought we would offer to signed up and paid up members of Montessori Europe. Our task as a new board is to increase the membership, because with increased membership, we will have the money to really do the things that we want to do. So if you are not a member, and if you find these webinars really interesting, please sign up. But if you are signed up, as of today, you will be allowed, or you will have the opportunity to receive a certificate of attendance, which would demonstrate your commitment to continued professional development. And to receive that certificate, you will have to answer the poll right at the end of the session. I hope you will enjoy tonight, and I hand over to Hannah Bainham. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. My name is Hannah Bainham. I am a 0 to 6 Montessori educator. I am a teacher trainer at Montessori Center International. And I have recently fallen in love again with practical life. I'm very happy to be here to share my journey with you in practical life. My journey, which has been one of rediscovery, which has happened in my work with future teachers, in my work with future Montessori guides. I think often, actually I know, and I know many of you on the screen, not even often, I know that some of the purest Montessori moments I've had have come from new Montessori teachers, because they're discovering the curriculum, they're discovering the philosophy for the first time, and they're really using that time to understand, and you can see it from the fresh eyes. In the same way that we see the awe and the wonder from the children when we introduce something new, I love seeing that in teachers and future teachers in my adult classrooms. And so this is something that I've been reflecting on, and I've been thinking about what practical life really means. And today I'm going to share a little bit with you about my understanding of practical life. And I hope that during your breakout sessions, you'll also be able to have some of these conversations together, and then we can come back and really rethink what we're talking about when it comes to practical life. So today I'm going to be talking about rethinking practical life, how the indirect objectives should be our main objective. Barbara Isaacs wrote this wonderful blog this week in Montessori Europe and Montessori Musings about the practical life being the starting point of the Montessori classroom. And so I would love that we're starting off the year with our Montessori webinars talking about this starting point in the Montessori classroom. So Montessori said the exercises of practical life are formative experiences, a work of adaptation to the environment. It's a place where we start. It's the beginning of the curriculum. It's a place of comfort as children transition from home life into the classroom. It's an introduction to the classroom culture, right? It's the introduction to the expectations, the ground rules, the grace and courtesy. It is the beginning. And because it's the beginning, it's where the first place that the seeds are planted, both literally, we often do a lot of gardening in practical life, but also figuratively. So it's the planting of these seeds that really help a child understand their environment and start to understand the social dynamics of their environment and start to understand the place that they have in the world, their responsibility, the place, the connection that they have with others in the world. I really think that practical life is a key moment where we can start thinking about the idea of cosmic education. And as Barbara said in her introduction, cosmic education is something that we often look at in primary school in the second plane of development. But I think that because practical life is this beginning area, because it's the place where the introduction to the classroom and the culture, this is the ideal place to start thinking about some of these connections, these understandings, these key principles of cosmic education. And one of those is respect. We see this throughout the Montessori classroom, but especially in practical life, because this is where children are starting to learn to put things back, to take care of the environment, to be responsible, but to respect other people, right? And the thing about practical life is that respect comes first from an individual place, right? Most practical life activities are individual experiences for children because they need to be connected to the material individually based upon their own skills and ability. But within that, the individuality comes that sense of community, right? And there is respect, and that's where respect is planted. That idea of setting up snack for friends, of pouring water for your classmates, of respecting when something has spilt and you're cleaning up. There's a huge respect that we plant in the practical life area. The respect for the classroom culture, again, the respect that those grace and courtesy tools that we use that really set up the expectations and those ground rules which will carry on throughout their education and throughout their Montessori experience. We also plant the seeds of responsibility, right? In the responsibility, we see that care of the environment, the care of plants, the care of a glass when it breaks, the responsibility of being a part of a community, of creating an understanding of what it means to be responsible. And this, I would say, is maybe some of the first times that children are asked to be responsible, right? Because at home, when they're with their parents, they're often taken care of, and that responsibility, maybe if they have older siblings, but that responsibility isn't really seen. They want those responsibilities. They crave that independence, right? And that independence and responsibility go hand in hand. Now, we talk about independence in practical life, but we don't really talk about the interdependence in practical life, right? It's that interdependence of, you know, the water that we use in our pouring activities, maybe at the end of the day is used to water the plants, or the taking care of the animals, the pets. We're seeing that responsibility within the expectations of our classroom, but that interdependence, how everything is connected. And we play a part in creating that classroom culture, that classroom community. The interdependence to me is that vital connection of culture, of socialization, right? Where we start to realize that, you know, the child is in that sensitive period for socialization, but they start to realize that actually, I have fun when I play with others. I have fun when I role play in the practical life area. I have fun making tea. I have fun being part of something bigger than myself, right? And so those social interactions are key in that interdependence, but also seeing that responsibility and that respect and how they all build upon each other. The idea of sustainability. Sustainability is a very important topic in this day and age. The idea of climate change, we're seeing the voices coming from children, coming from the adolescents saying enough is enough, we need to do things. Now, These children that we work with, especially those 3 to 6 children or the younger children, it is their future, right? They will inherit the earth that we have given them. So planting those seeds of sustainability, of simple things like when you're doing cutting in practical life, of using those cuttings to go in the collage area, go in the creative area, using those cuttings to be recycled in some way, right? Those ideas of sustainability are planted within practical life because they are activities of everyday life. They need to become those activities that are not unusual in our everyday life, that they're a part of our routine, we're part of our responsibility, part of our understanding of the interdependence, how everything's connected, and part of the respect we have for the environment. And lastly, and this is definitely my favorite, is that children realize that they are a citizen of the world. One of my favorite things to do is to go to bazaars around the world and find little bowls or little spoons or little containers to use in practical life, because they not only introduce children to different cultures, but they carry the stories within them, right? The stories of something being made so intricately, of being useful within families and culture, and some of the children may see some of their things that they have at home on the shelves in their classroom. Being a citizen of the world does not mean just focusing on the differences, right? It's focusing on the similarities we have. We all eat, we all drink water, we all are part of this world. And by introducing children, not in a way that enforces stereotypes, but in a way that is a genuine connection to other aspects, to other children of the world, you're planting those seeds of what it means to be a citizen of the world. I wanted to show you an example of this again, and something I often do with my students is showing them practical examples of what I'm meaning, right? It's the same way that with children, that hands-on learning, that those practical examples are key. So this is my nephew, Julian. He is 3 years old and he's feeding Annie the dog, right? You see the actions, those fine motor skills that are used, those gross motor skills that are used, but also you start seeing these aspects of cosmic education in this skill, in this participating in a family event, in a family routine. So allowing children to participate in the practical parts of family life. And this doesn't mean just setting up a beautiful practical life area, right? Where there's lots, and I've tried that with my first nephew at 2.5. I had the most beautiful practical life area, and he didn't use it much. He liked to use things that were in the kitchen, that were the adult size, that were something that he'd seen his papa use, or something that he'd seen somebody else use. He wanted to be a part of that, right? So when we're talking to parents, and especially during this time, I think it's really important to talk about how the children who can contribute to the home life, right? And being part of those practical parts of family life, how big or how small they are, but showing that responsibility, showing that care and that love that comes with feeding Annie the dog, is really planting those ideas of respect and interdependence. So Julian has done that full cycle of activity, that full event of going from opening the container to transferring, to bringing the food over to Annie, and then Annie eating the food, right? So Julian is shown that he plays an important part in Annie's life, right? He's feeding Annie, right? But he's also showing that respect for animal kind, and he's also showing that responsibility, that craving for independence that we see in young children. Practical life allows children to learn more about their culture, right? It allows them to play a part of their home life and gives them a sense of belonging, and allows them to see themselves as a citizen of the world. I think that Montessori, in practical life, Montessori goes beyond those ideas of those main objectives to refine motor skills, for that care of self, for that care of the environment. It's much deeper than this, right? And through this, through things like making Papa's coffee in the morning or playing tea party and making a tea, a Turkish style tea with Auntie Hannah, Julian is introduced to that sense of belonging, that culture, but also he recognizes himself as a part of that world, of that society. I think children right now are spending a lot of time at home, right? We know that. A lot of you may be doing remote learning, and there's a lot of struggles in supporting families and supporting parents with that remote learning. I think especially with the 3 to 6 age range, we need to alleviate some of that pressure that parents feel that maybe their children are falling behind. I think the areas where the children might be suffering are those social aspects of life, which they really miss from the classrooms, as we've seen when they've come back into the classrooms, how much they miss those friendships. But allowing the child to participate in those activities of home life, we're supporting parents in their understanding of Montessori and how Montessori works at home. But this is also an area we should encourage families to focus on during this time of the pandemic, right? The indirect objectives that the child is learning through something like making a cup of coffee or having a tea party or feeding Annie the dog is far greater than any potential numeracy or literacy lessons, right? Because everything we show the child is introducing them, is helping them have confidence in themselves and have responsibility and see that they are able to do something. And these indirect objectives are the key aspects of what sets them up for the rest of their learning journey. I really believe Montessori gives children a foundation and a love for learning. And I think that foundation and love for learning starts off in this area of practical life by developing that confidence, the independence, the responsibility, the concentration, all of those aspects. By developing it, we are setting them up for future learning. We're setting them up for the more advanced numeracy, the more advanced literacy. I have worked with many parents who haven't understood practical life. And often they want to see a lot of the numeracy activities, or they want to see a lot of the literacy activities, but they don't really understand the concepts behind practical life. In fact, I had one father say, I don't want my child to learn how to sew. He's a boy, he shouldn't learn how to sew. It was that connection that I made with him talking to the father, actually sitting down and doing a sewing activity with the father. That hand-eye coordination, that concentration it took to thread the needle, that order and that one-to-one correspondence were those key aspects that were developing the child for numeracy and literacy, right? But for the parent, it was just an activity of sewing on the shelf. But for us, it's about really bringing that world to the parents and really being able to understand the parents. And I think if you were to do any parent education with your families, it should really be focusing on practical life and showing the key reasons why we start with this area and show its importance, because then it again sets up the child for those other moments. So looking at these indirect objectives, it was one of my students who came up with this acronym, COSMIC, and I just loved it. That idea of concentration. Practical life develops concentration in a way that is so beautiful and so unique and really shows that joy and love for work. As we see in this picture, Barbara's granddaughter is sewing a leaf, right? That concentration, that joy, that wonder that we see will definitely prepare her for the other areas of the environment and will give her that confidence to be able to learn to do something a little more tricky, right? Order, that love for order that we see. That order is so key in our environment, not only to cater towards that sensitive period, but also to show that idea of respect and responsibility, right? The order is what we as practitioners need to make sure we have right in the classroom, that is beautiful and attractive, and that the practical life is something that children want to do, so they're able to satisfy this understanding of order. Then we have socialization. Often I would just sit, if I really wanted to know what was happening in children's lives, I would go and sit in the practical life area. So many conversations and so much beauty happens in this area. And it's usually because maybe there's less pressure in this area, that children can do things alongside each other. So two children may be pouring, but they're having a conversation about their grandfather coming, or they're having a conversation about pets, or whatever is meaningful to them at that time. And I think that this practical life area really develops that love for socialization. Children want to be responsible, they want to be independent because they want to participate in something, they want to belong, right? And it's this socialization that we should encourage. Movement. Montessori, talks heavily about the idea of movement, right? And especially when she's talking about practical life, she even talks about gymnastics and the importance of gross motor skills. But this movement is how children learn. And practical life is that key area where we're showing, we're refining, we're working on these movements to allow the child to participate in other areas, right? Dr. Laura Shaw was saying that, the movements, our brain is set up just for movement, right? It's the reason why we have brains, to be able to move these muscles within our body, right? So movement is so important in how we learn. And this really sets up that idea of movement being key in learning. Independence. There's nothing more joyful than watching that 5-year-old tie his shoe for the first time and you not having to do it anymore. That independence is key and beautiful. And that independence inspires the confidence in children. And the confidence is what will allow the child to try something that's a little tricky, will allow the child to choose a literacy or a numeracy activity that may be a little challenging, because they know that they're able to do things. They have that confidence, they have that ability, because they've been allowed to practice, to repeat, they've been encouraged to do these things. And so when we're thinking about the practical life and the meaning behind practical life, I want you to remember this acronym, COSMIC. The concentration, order, socialization, movement, independence, and confidence. And these indirect objectives setting up the child for the rest of their life. The classroom is a great place to do practical life, but practical life happens beyond the classroom walls as well. And I believe that practical life is, in its pure form, is meant to be in nature and is meant to have these experiences with nature. It's the planting of the seeds, the literal planting of the seeds in the garden. It's learning how to brush a horse and ride a horse for the first time. It's being out in nature and seeing those cosmic, that cosmic education, seeing that sustainability, that interdependence that is so integral to Montessori philosophy, right? Is that experience and that connection with nature. My family is a family of fisher people, not fishermen, fisher people, because women can fish too. And my nephews are learning how to fish alongside their family, because they are being because they're learning that task of casting and waiting and patience and concentration, but also it's giving them a sense of belonging to participate in something that both of their parents love to do. My brother and sister-in-law, my brother are catch and release fishermen, so they release the fish at the end. And again, it's that cycle of putting the fish back into the water and seeing that interdependence, that connection there. Montessori says in the 1946 London Lectures, it is not just the practical life in the house, cleaning rooms, watering plants, etc., that is important, but the fact that everyone in the world must move with a purpose and must work, but not only for himself, but also for others. I think this is a key part that we must remember. The child does this for themselves, but also the child is learning how to do things for others. Practical life allows children to participate in real life. And by developing those indirect objectives, which are a foundation for cultivating a love for learning. Right? Our role as adults is to have the trust and the patience to let them do so. And that trust and patience is key in the classroom. It's the key in working with parents and having them understand what practical life means and how they can support the child's Montessori journey at home. But it's the trust and the patience that will give the children the confidence to cultivate this love for learning. Great. So now we're going to do our breakout sessions, and Gwendolyn is going to put our breakout question in the chat. But today we're going to talk about, in your view, how relevant are the principles underpinning cosmic education to our practice today? So think about those ideas of responsibility, respect, interdependence, and what Montessori terms those cosmic education. And how do you think they're applicable to even a younger CASA class, or even the toddler to the CASA class, not just the older children, where we start introducing the great stories. And then we'll come back together and we'll reflect on what it means, what the ideas that we came up with together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. It looks like that we have had interesting discussions. May I go to perhaps let's start with Carola. Carola, would you like to share some of the thoughts from your breakout room?
Yes, we've decided that like parents are very important to get involved in the importance of practical life, so they get an understanding of why we have this curriculum area in the classroom. And in that way, you need to probably involve them in what goes on, and another way also, of course, to show them what they, you know, the literacy and maths and so on that goes into the practical life indirectly. Like, for instance, if you're planting tulip bulbs to 2-year-olds, which I brought up as an example, you know, when, first of all, they care for the plants. All of a sudden you have a little green thing that starts growing. And then we're doing counting of how many little green things that come. And then we're doing colors, because one tulip is purple, one is yellow, and so on. So that you can see the educational purpose and so on as well, so that the parents understand that. And that we give all the children time to learn how to put their shoes on, how to help others, which leads to helping others. When you are learning something for yourself, you foster helpfulness and respect for others in the classroom and in your group and so on. So, and the independence that this gives, of course. And then hopefully the children then will take that with them home as well, so that parents can see that they are what they are learning and where it's leading. We've spoken about so much, that we mustn't rush things. Things take time. So for instance, it's so little that's needed to help a child become independent and knowing how to get the confidence to know it. Little thing of just showing how a shoe is turned a little bit more to the left, and all of a sudden you can put your shoe on. That is a huge step for a little child.
I think that's really good contributions. Thank you, Carola. Shall we go to some of the other people? Perhaps I wonder if Suzanne would like to contribute.
Golly, did we have a discussion in room 6? So we had, first of all, we started by being challenged about the concept, Montessori's concept of cosmic theory, and its sort of roots and links to Roman Catholic, I can't say the word, Roman Catholic, whatever, you know what I mean, Roman Catholic faith. I can't get that word out. And to see, just challenging us to think about whether what is termed today as cosmic education is still the same thought process as what Montessori initially had. If it's possibly, you know, if some of the experiences that we're giving children today are framed as cosmic education to make it more acceptable and valuable for the parents, so that the parents start to see more value in that. So we had quite a lot of discussion around that, which was very interesting. But then also looking at just the role of the adult. Quite a few of our participants spoke about the role of the adult and needing to implement the principles within themselves of respect, responsibility, and interdependence and sustainability, and observation, that it's so important to observe the children and see what it is that they are doing and what they are needing to do. And I thought that one thing we got right at the end was that cosmic task ultimately is a word. What we really want to be doing is to become a better link between the children and the world that they live in. So thank you, everybody in room 6. It was great.
That's great thought to leave us with. Thank you, Suzanne. Jarek, have you got something to contribute?
Yeah, I think that our discussion, I mean, revolved around a few concepts, so to say, a few notions. One of which was emotional and social resilience, the discussion went in this direction that the participants agreed that indirect aims or objectives of practical life activities and practical life as a part of curriculum may lead to the resilience, which is currently very important, and so on and so forth. And that's one thing. And the other thing was that it helps children to feel comfortable with their limits, to recognize the limits, and also preparing them for constant uncertainty in the world. So yeah, this is what appeared in our discussion. And also the participants of this breakout room pointed out to the empowerment and confidence as two skills is not the right word, two concepts that are very important in adulthood life. Yeah, so that's pretty much it, what happened in our...
Brilliant, thank you. Wendy?
We had some lovely discussions, actually, and one or two of our participants were just starting out on their travels, their Montessori travels, which is rather nice. And so we were comparing notes. And we had several people who are already trainers, and we were saying that how nice it was to be able to tie up the sustainability with the practical life. And Michelle was a brilliant contributor because she's nearly finished her thesis, or whatever it's called now, a doctorate, sorry, on Malawi. Sorry, Michelle. And talking about the experience in Malawi, where the children have absolutely nothing, but they do. They have their whole natural environment. And we're all looking forward to reading her work when it's finished. But it was a very good session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Marion?
So yes, we had also a lovely discussion in our group. We talked mainly about the outside, how to bring practical life or activities of everyday living into the outside environment, because we were very inspired by Hannah's pictures of the outside environment. So we talked a lot about composting and water butts and helping the children to use the activities to grow, to plant seeds, to see the changes. So many indirect objectives on top of the current indirect objectives that we all talk about, you know, actually watching the change, sustainability, to use yogurt pots to grow the seeds in. We had a lovely conversation about somebody who uses water quite a lot through their water butt, where they did an experiment with whether or not cucumber boats float. So helping the children to go further with it, to inspire them. But we talked also a lot about the kind of three aspects of parents being very on board, making sure that when the parents visit the setting, we don't gravitate towards just towards the maths shelves and the language shelves, but, you know, making sure they fully understand, having maybe an open evening for the parents to come along and actually use some of the materials themselves. We talked about how enlightening it is and how pleasurable it is for the adult to be within that area of the nursery, and how enjoyable it is to see these little tiny children coming in and really getting their hands on materials that are familiar, but maybe they haven't always been enabled or empowered to use it. And then we talked about the children and how imaginative they are with the materials, with sometimes not even knowing quite what to do with it, how their imagination empowers them to use them in many different ways. So really lovely discussion. And, you know, I think we all felt that area of the curriculum is such a joyful joyful place. And I loved the sort of sign off from Hannah, you know, patience and trust. I love that. Yeah. To let them do it themselves, you know, that really was key to me. I love that.
Brilliant, thank you. Sarah.
Probably the big takeaway from the group that I was lucky enough to talk with was about role modeling, about the importance of the adult. We had several people who worked with very young children, and so that opportunity and the real love that everybody had for activities of everyday living and being in the outside environment. And one of the contributors talked about the cosmic task, and if you are independent, if you are confident, if you have the attributes, then it's possible to move forward and find your cosmic task at some point in the future. And I just dropped into the conversation at the end about sustainable development goals and education for sustainability as things to look into, because several of the people in the group were very new in their learning journeys. But Brilliant. They were wonderful participants from all over Europe. Yeah.
Yes, please join us on the 27th of February, when we will devote a whole day to sustainability with some theoretical ideas about why it is necessary to support this idea, but also with practical ideas of how to do it. But I would just like to add a tiny bit from our room, from our conversation. What I really liked was the challenge of not always seeing practical life as something that is on the shelf, seeing practical life as something that happens because it's the cause and effect of our behavior. And one of the newcomers to Montessori said she couldn't quite understand why the teachers would scatter rose petals for the children to sweep them when they have left tons of mud on the steps as they were walking up the stairs from the garden. And that's my thought I would like to leave you with. Practical life is about learning life skills, not necessarily creating activities on the shelf. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, everyone. It was lovely to hear some of your reflections and some of the key points that I got out of all of this was that idea of take time to observe, see what is working, what needs to be brought to life again, what isn't working, are the indirect objectives happening? And how do you see cosmic education principles coming to life in your practical life setting? Be a role model, a link to the world that they live in. I love that idea of practical life being linked to empowerment, because they're developing that self-confidence and they're being empowered by what they're learning, that they can do it. And I love that. This was a quote that came in the Montehistory this week, which I really loved. We are convinced that the child can do a great deal for us, more than we can do for them. We adults are rigid. We remain in one place, but the child is all motion. We see the figure of the child who stands before us with their arms held open, beckoning humanity to follow. I encourage you all to revisit the beginning, repeat and learn from the children, and try to see something new to love in practical life. Thank you so much for being with me tonight and sharing our journey, and I look forward to seeing you at future Montessori Europe webinars. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It was fantastic for you to set us on the path of discussion. And thank you all the facilitators. Some of you had to jump in at the last minute because so many of you have actually physically turned up. It is a huge joy to see that our webinars attract so many of you. We look forward to seeing you in the beginning of March for another webinar, but don't forget about our Sustainability Day. Thank you very much, everybody. See you soon and join if you can.